There's always something to be said about art once you start evaluating its critics, right? You can always determine what impact it has on society by those who try to ultimately silence it. We've seen this time and time again throughout society. We saw this with book burnings back in the 1940s. We've seen this, or 1930s, 1940s. We've seen this with destruction of literature over just the centuries in general. But when it comes to pop culture, when it comes to what we have in our current modern era, one of the more interesting things is, well, now movies are kind of being looked at as being this gateway into something that could cause violence and mayhem, death and destruction. At least that's the case if you look at what's going on with the Joker. Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's movie that opens here in a couple weeks is doing something that I never quite thought possible. It is getting the left in such a tizzy that they are outright trying to claim that this movie will create the next Columbine, will create the next Parkland, will create the next mass shooter. I mean, I called out Peter Gretta from Slash Film a couple weeks ago for making that exact same claim, and he got furious at me as a result of it. He thought I was misrepresenting his claims, misrepresenting what he was saying, but he was simply the first of many to come out and make this attempt at trying to judge the Joker based upon what they saw, which is their right to do, by the way, but do it in a way where the general public can't talk about it just yet because the general public hasn't seen it. And when I pressed Peter on the issue, Peter's response was, well, I can't talk about it because no one has seen it yet. And I'm like, well, then you need to pull back your tweets until the people can engage in that in a way that's it's going to provide critical thought and anything else. And he refused to do so. And we're seeing this from a lot of other people as well, that they're refusing to do so. It's what I and many other people are now starting to refer to as Joker derangement syndrome. It's a very unique thing, obviously, but it's not. It's not as unique as you might think, right? It rears its ugly head every once in a while. When I say unique, I mean in regards to a comic book movie now being talked about from the perspective of something that you might have seen coming out of the 70s when in regards to, rock albums, right? Remember when you had all the parents, all the Christian groups, the religious groups that were coming out in the 70s claiming that if you listen to Kiss backwards, they would send satanic signals and it would turn your children into violent sociopaths. Or in the late 80s and early 90s, when you had Tipper Gore and Joe Lieberman coming out and saying that rap music makes you violent, that video games make you violent. And then they created the ESRB as a way to ultimately shut them up and go, well, look, we're going to rate these video games now. Or they did the parental advisory, stickers on these rap albums and whatnot, right? As a way to just to curb the moral outrage, the faux moral outrage over this stuff that people just didn't get because they were clearly not in tune with where things were in the time. And I feel like that continued on, especially in video games in the early 2000s when you had Jack Thompson out of Florida attempting to claim that Grand Theft Auto would make you a violent shooter. Move into the early 2010s and you have Anita Sarkeesian claiming that video games now will not only make you violent, but will make you sexist. And then we had that battle for years. No, study after study after study came out and showed us that this is never the case, that this was never real, this was never reality, this was just a made-up boogeyman. As always is the case here, are these made-up boogeymen. And in regards to the Joker, it's a made-up boogeyman. It's just simply a made-up thing. Joker derangement syndrome is a thing based off of nothing. For some reason, and I don't want to use, and here's the thing, I am a Bernie Sanders 2020 supporting left-leaning liberal from Washington State. So my politics are well known on the internet for who I believe should be president and what kind of policies I believe in. But even I'm like, you guys are going too damn far with this, right? Because art is subjective and obviously they have the right to interpret it the way that they want. But what we're seeing here is a weird situation kind of revolving around the Joker. So you had people coming off of the early screenings of the film that were noticeably upset that they weren't invited. Right? There's a couple people from different outlets that were invited to go. There's about 15 or 20 people that were invited to a pre-screening of the film. And then you had people like Roca from Collider Video saying that no Latino people were invited, when that's not true. Louis Lecca from Nuke the Fridge was there, and he's Cuban. So, you know what? Trying to say that, they're trying to create these narratives of who was invited, that Warner Brothers was trying to select only white men to go and see this movie simply isn't the case. Then coming off of Venice, where it did very well in Venice, you had more people coming out and saying, no, like Yolanda Machado from The Wrap coming out and saying, only trust reviews from women or women of color in regards to Joker. No explanation as to why. No explanation as to why, but to demonize any man that was going to be reviewing this movie, especially a white man who was going to be reviewing this movie. You've got more people coming out and trying to claim that this film is going to make shooters. It's going to create mass murderers. It's going to create all of these things. But they provide no evidence to support it. They provide no subject matter on Twitter to back it up. They in the case of Peter Gretta, they make those wild accusations, very dangerous accusations in my opinion, almost slanderous accusations in my opinion, and then followed up with, well, I can't talk about it right now because the movie's not out yet. The movie opens up in 3 weeks. People are going to go see it. It's currently tracking to open with $100 million. And I think that this outrage, this Joker derangement syndrome that we're seeing coming from the press is going to only further it higher in the box office. And I just want to put this out there to anyone out there who is a certified Rotten Tomatoes critic who might have seen the movie, or a certified member of the Film Critic Society or whatever. Let me just be bluntly 100% clear with you right now. You don't really matter in the way that you think. And you maybe know that. That's kind of where we find ourselves here. You know that ultimately your reviews, while positive, are not going to get many clicks. But if you come out with a negative angle, if you hate on a movie before anyone else has seen it, it's a grift that keeps on grifting. Because you can use anger and outrage in order to get people to click on your articles, to click on your websites, to click on your blogs, to engage with your cheat tweets, to rise up your analytics, to get you more followers, to justify that blue check mark. But at the end of the day, all you do is sow division. Movie enjoyment in this current day and age is in a very, very, very precarious position, because most people just tend to watch tentpole films, and only a couple of them really tend to do well. There's so many other flops. And a lot of you guys out there absolutely relish in the concept of reporting on your flops. You're like, oh, this flopped. It's so good. Because you can spin it as a way to get people to click on your website. So before this movie comes out, this movie that's not even controversial. It wasn't controversial 2 years ago when they announced it. We already knew that it was going to be mired after or modeled after Taxi Driver. We already knew that Arthur was going to be modeled more after Travis Bickle. We knew that Scorsese was a heavy influence. He was originally listed as going to be an executive producer. We knew that The King of Comedy was going to be another influential film, that this was going to pull from another Scorsese film. We know all these things. Todd Phillips took the Scorsese model from the 70s and 80s, and I think King of Comedy was even early 90s, and he took it and he turned it into an origin story for the Joker. And for some reason, this is driving you insane. This is driving you absolutely, positively, fundamentally insane. And you're coming out there and you're basically trying to claim that this movie is going to bring about the next shooter. It's going to bring about the next mass murder. It's going to be the next Parkland shooter or Columbine shooter or anything else. And I understand that in our society right now, that is a general fear. We don't know when the next shell casing is going to hit the floor, if you know what I mean. They happen frequently. And we do have to do something about it in this country as a result of that. And a lot of that boils down to mental health. But trying to critique art, a story that may have subject matter that you might deem to be disturbing as being a catalyst, a cause, a reasoning behind these actions, is fundamentally proven false. We see time and time again that when these people leave their manifestos, it's not based upon pop culture or pop entertainment. There are ideas espoused by those with far extreme views that tend to be the ones that get echoed in these manifestos. None of it is going to be based around movies. The Christchurch shooter, his manifesto, was there anything there about movies? No, it was mostly about far-right commentators and memes on the internet. But I don't see you coming out there and trying to say that the next meme that you guys reshare, Heroic Hollywood, is going to end up causing a shooting, right? If you guys share a joke, is it going to cause a shooting? You don't say those kind of things because you know deep down it's ridiculous. And a lot of us know that deep down, that's all it is a cover. It's a distraction from what the real threat is. And that, of course, is the far extremism that people are backing, and then they're masking it with jokes and memes and pepes. I'm sorry that you guys don't follow this from an educational perspective. You live in your echo chamber, whether or not it's LA or New York or Frisco or wherever. You live in an echo chamber that oftentimes can't be penetrated. I know because I follow a lot of you on Twitter and you say some really dumb things. And this is coming from a guy who said a lot of really dumb things on the internet. But you have to also be willing to open up your mind and understand that not everything is black and white. Most life is gray. And if you want to take a movie like Joker, which is going to probably go on to win Best Picture, and you're trying to stack the deck against it right now, I can only ask why. Like show me on the doll where the movie touched you, because it clearly didn't. A lot of you have already turned against this film before even seeing it, because that is the narrative created by your peers, of which for some reason you are attempting to model. Joker derangement syndrome is real and you're a part of it. And it's one of the reasons why we're seeing the divisive nature over the Rotten Tomatoes score. Oh, well, critics are now turning against the movie. No, more critics are seeing the movie, and more critics are living in an echo chamber, and more critics aren't objectively watching the film for what it is or what it's attempting to do or what it's attempting to say, because they don't want to go against the narrative. And we know that this happens. Right? I'll give you guys a quick example before I wrap up. 4 years ago, Mad Max Fury Road is getting to come out, right? Mad Max Fury Road was going to come out. And all of a sudden, all these headlines started popping up saying men's rights activists call for boycott of movie. And it ran everywhere. It made mainstream news. Men's rights activists call for boycotting of Mad Max Fury Road because of feminism. And everyone ran with it, but no one did the research. And you know what the research was? It wasn't men's rights activists. It came from one guy on one website. And that website said in its about page that they hate men's rights activists. And that one man who made that claim to boycott the movie is not a men's rights activist. In fact, he's a far-right personality on the internet, an alt-right poster child. I believe he even runs alt-right podcasts. That's the guy who created an entire false narrative about a movie because one dude said, you should boycott it because of feminism, and everyone ran with it because no one bothered to do the research. And as a result of that, I would go out to events and I would talk to people about movies coming out, and they would say, "Oh, well, this whole thing with the men's rights activists and Mad Max," and I'd sit there and stop them, and I'd have to explain everything because the news sources that they're getting were biased in an echo chamber and didn't want to actually do the hard work of trying to find out what the story was, when the story was right there in front of you if you clicked on the about page of the website of which we were referring to. You guys are creating the problem here. You're trying to cast doubt and aspersions on a film the vast majority of people haven't seen because you are afraid. And I understand that. I get that. You're afraid of what could happen. You're afraid of going to the theater if there's going to be a shooter. You're afraid of going to the mall if there's going to be a shooter. You're afraid of going to school if there's going to be a shooter. And you know what? You have every right to be afraid. You do. Society, our modern society has shown us that 100%. But you don't have the right to cast that blame where it doesn't belong. You don't have the right to blame video games which have been proven to not cause it, to blame movies which have been proven to not cause it. This movie, which isn't even out yet, that 99.999999999.8% of the population hasn't seen. You cannot make that claim. And you're out there trying to make that claim for no other reason than quick profits off of slandering a movie that a lot of people want to see. And I'm just going to break it down for you. You matter so little in the grand scheme of things that your negativity is going to go out there to certain people. And all they're going to do is go, oh, well, now I want to see the movie more because these people hate it. And now I'm curious. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. Don't do that. Don't be morons. You're smarter than this. So start scaling it back. You want to not like the movie? Not like the movie, that's fine. But putting out the quotes that it could potentially lead down a dangerous path is not only absurd, it's misleading. Especially if you're not going to follow it up with an immediate, here's why I think this, and here's a real world examples to back it up, which I haven't seen happen yet. It's all hyperbole and nonsense, bathed in an echo chamber. Or trapped in an echo chamber, really. But anyway, those are just my thoughts on this. You can agree or disagree, and many of you out there will probably do both. And I invite you to leave your comment below. I invite you to like or dislike the video, however you want to see fit. But I do really want you to subscribe. That's going to be a thing. And I will talk to you guys all later. Have yourself a great day. Go see Joker when it comes out, because at this point, it's now going to be the cultural phenomenon of the year. Whether it's deserving or not, that doesn't matter anymore, because Chucklefucks on Rotten Tomatoes have basically made it that way.